Welcome back. A gauge of business confidence have moved on slightly, but the direction is down. The Business Confidence Index released by the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SACCI, fell by 0.3 index points in June this year to reach 93.7 points. Unlike other measures that look at business confidence through surveys, SACCI's index measures real economic activity. The Chamber says the weaker rand affected trade, and there were lower retail sales, and the value of building plans passed was lower in June compared to May. The higher cost of electricity and less stable energy supply was also a factor. SACCI says there are still good signs with debt being contained and a sound banking sector, but it says it has become imperative that structural economic impediments be addressed rationally. Meanwhile, SACCI says it has noted that South Africa has of late experienced a sharp weakening in the balance of payments position. This has resulted in a larger deficit on the current account, as well as net selling of bonds and shares by non-residents. This led to additional volatility and weakening of the rand exchange rate. To help us unpack the details of the Business Confidence Index, we are joined by Richard Downing, who is an economist from the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much for coming.
Pleasure, Colin.
Let's talk about the issues that lead to the downward spiral first of the economy. Can you just paint a global picture as to what is happening there?
Well, I think, as you've mentioned, this is not a perception index. It's actually measuring what is happening in the markets and in the real economy. So it informs business to some extent, you know, and informs us about their actions, which again reflects on the business climate. And what we see here is actually in the real economy between March and between May and June, actually there was some decline, and especially in the real economy. The positive things were actually export-imports in terms of commercial imports and exports, and then there was vehicle sales, always positive, and inflation is still a good figure that to look at. So those were the positive. But I think we must look back a little bit further. I mean, if you take January, the index was at about 100. There was large expectations because of new leadership, political leadership and all that. But, of course, there are always the economy to deal with. And I think what we're seeing now is the decline from 100 to about 94 is the fact that there's structural issues to be addressed in the economy, which makes it a little bit more difficult just to replace people as such.
When you say structural impediments, what are you actually referring to?
Well, I think the first thing we know is about fiscal impediments. We know the fiscus is under large pressure. Treasury is under large pressure. The revenue side of things isn't performing as well as it should. We know on the expenditure side there's a lot of social needs that must be addressed and challenges that we face in that terms, and that puts a lot of pressure on the fiscus as such. On local government level, we know that they're not doing too well in terms of service delivery, and those are all issues. All business are operating somewhere in a local authority. I think in the May report we actually pointed out that it's very important on local government level actually to get things straightened up, because that is the place where actually business performs, and we should make sure at that level at least that we're doing well. And then of course attend to the other issues, macroeconomic stability and price stability and that type of issues.
So when you look at the macroeconomic perspective, you remember that when we started the year we had that confidence, especially with regards to the politics of this country and the turnaround within the ruling party. But when we saw the GDP figures coming out, it was a real disappointment and unexpected. So then with this change of events, what is it that can happen? What should be done so that the economy can turn around?
Well, I think it's not that the economy suddenly there was a change of events in the economy as such. I think it was always looming there. I mean, and the president, in the first instance, he appointed a sort of team to go outside and look for investment, because that is one of the biggest problems in the economy, to get a fixed investment actually to push economic growth. And I think the need there is very, very huge actually to get fixed investment, not portfolio investment as such. And I think that is what we look lacking at the moment, and that's not easy to fix. It's not a political issue, it's more a real economic issue. And that's what we tend to now, and that's why where we say we've now attended to a lot of this maladministration issues, and there's still some of it present. But we must now turn to the real structural issues and try to reform the economy to get growth and employment going. Because if you look at it, we've got a chart there in terms of our 24 peer economies. South Africa's growth is the lowest amongst those 24. And from business, that's important because high growth economies sort of does not guarantee, but there is a possibility of getting good returns on your investment. And we don't have that in South Africa at the moment.
When you look at the power generation sector right now, we have the wage negotiations between the unions and Eskom. The employer is not really offering what the employees are looking for, and they say that if ever they don't get what they want, in terms of their demand. Secondly, if Eskom decides to retrench, they will go on a full-blown strike. So would this then threaten business confidence?
It will definitely. I think in the first place, if you get wage demands that way above inflation, you're surely not going to see inflation as a positive aspect in terms of business confidence, as we've seen now. So inflation is the first thing that's going to suffer because electricity prices will have to increase. Consumers will have to pay more. Business will have to pay more. They're going to forward those prices onto the consumer again, and there we go in terms of inflation spirals. So therefore it's important. The problem is, it's not whether one can afford it, it's what the economy actually can afford. And I think that's what we're battling with. The same with government in terms of, there's a lot of talk about, the payroll of government and how huge it is and how it actually battles actually to fund that to some extent. And that is all issues that's not about being spiteful in terms of treasury, it's about the economy that is in dire straits actually to finance this type of demands from the economy.
Okay, later in this week we'll be seeing data concerning mining and manufacturing coming out. How do you see it faring?
Well, unfortunately, manufacturing isn't doing well at the moment, and that is one of the places, and mining especially, if you look at employment to some extent. We know about a mining charter and the battle that's going on there, the discussions taking place at the moment. But it's important to get those sectors going because mining especially is highly more labor intensive than some of the others. We know manufacturing is moving into high-tech type of processes, so that is a bit of a difficult one, and it's not doing that well as we would like it to see. But that is two sectors that we must get investment. South Africa doesn't generate enough capital to finance that investment. And that is the problem. We need foreign investment. And I think that's why it's so important for this team of the president to go outside South Africa and try and find capital to come into the country. And of course, protect the rand to some extent as well, because the depreciation of the rand, me and you are feeling it on our pockets. It's not only a business issue, but businesses are also feeling it in terms of input costs. And that is actually, reflecting on the business climate in which we have to operate.
All right. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
It's a pleasure.
That's Richard Downing Economist from the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry.